Konnichiwa. I'm Keiko Nakamura. I'm 72 years old, and I am going to beg you today, please stop doing these 7 things. I have watched so many people, good, intelligent, hardworking people, spend months, sometimes years, exhausted by decluttering that goes nowhere. They work constantly, they reorganize constantly, and their homes stay cluttered. Not because they're lazy, not because they don't care, but because they're spending enormous energy on tasks that produce almost no real result. I know this pattern intimately. After Hiroshi passed, after my children moved out, after I finally faced 40 years of accumulated life in our Sao Paulo apartment, I made every single one of these mistakes myself. I organized things I should have released. I felt guilty about purchases from 1991. I created elaborate storage systems for items I hadn't touched in a decade. I wasted months. Months I could have spent sewing, hosting friends, sitting in a peaceful room drinking tea. So today, I'm going to save you that time. 7 useless tasks. Why they trap us specifically as seniors, and what to do instead. Let's move quickly. Your time is valuable. Useless task number 1. Organizing before you decide. This is the most common mistake I see, and it feels so productive that most people never realize they're doing it. You pull things out of a cupboard. You start arranging them neatly. You fold, you sort by size. You create tidy little groups. 2 hours pass. You feel tired but satisfied. You look at the cupboard. It looks basically the same. Here is exactly what happened to me with my fabric collection. I was a seamstress for decades. This work supported our family during difficult years after we arrived in Brazil. I had accumulated an extraordinary amount of fabric. Beautiful fabric. Fabric from Japan, from Brazilian markets, from decades of careful selection. When I began decluttering, I spent 3 full weekends sorting fabric by weight, by color, by country of origin. I created a system. I labeled everything. It looked magnificent. And then I sat back and realized I had not asked myself a single time whether I actually needed this much fabric at 72, living alone, sewing at a pace very different from my working years. I had organized the question away instead of answering it. This happens to seniors particularly because we spent decades being responsible for organizing everything: households, schedules, other people's lives. Organization is our reflex. When we see disorder, our hands automatically begin arranging before our minds engage. But here is the logical problem. Why would you spend energy organizing items you might donate tomorrow? It is, forgive the expression, washing dishes before throwing them away. The rule is simple. Decide first, organize second. Pick up each item. Ask 3 questions. Do I love this? Do I actually use this? Does this fit who I am today, not who I was? If the answer is a clear yes, then, and only then, give it your organizational energy. Professional organizers call this the decision first rule. It reduces decluttering time by 70%, not 10%, 70%. Useless task number 2. Researching the perfect destination for every item. I understand this impulse completely. You have an item. You want it to go somewhere meaningful. You want to know it will be appreciated. So you begin researching. Which organization needs this exact type of item? Who would truly value this? And 3 hours later, the item is still in your home. I did this with Hiroshi's professional books. He was an engineer, and he had many technical volumes. I spent weeks trying to identify exactly the right university, exactly the right student program, exactly the right recipient. Hiroshi was a generous man. He would have wanted these books used. What he would not have wanted was for me to spend a month in research paralysis while living in a home where his books occupied 3 shelves I couldn't use. Here is the truth underneath donation perfectionism. It is not really about helping others. It is about managing our own guilt about letting go. If we find the perfect recipient, we feel better about releasing the item. So we search and search, trying to feel better enough to act. But here is what actually happens at donation centers. The staff knows their inventory. They know their partner organizations. They have established relationships with schools, programs, shelters, community groups. That book you spent 4 hours researching, an experienced donation center worker places it correctly in 4 minutes. Your job is not to be a logistics coordinator for your released possessions. Your job is to make the decision to release them. My rule? Choose 3 reliable donation locations and use only those 3. 1 general charity. 1 specialized organization. In Sao Paulo, I use one that serves recent immigrants, which feels personally meaningful given our family's own history of arriving somewhere new. 1 local community organization. Everything goes to one of these 3, sorted by basic category. Nothing requires extensive research unless an item is genuinely valuable. And by valuable, I mean significantly, provably valuable, not valuable to your memory. Stop researching, start releasing. Useless task number 3, building elaborate just-in-case systems. This one, I must warn you, actually makes your home more cluttered. Not the same, more. Because you are not decluttering. You are reorganizing your anxiety. When I was building our life in Brazil, new country, new language, Hiroshi and I both working, 3 children, financial uncertainty in those early years, I kept everything. Everything. Because replacement felt impossible. Because scarcity was real. Because you simply did not know what tomorrow would require. That mindset saved us during genuinely difficult times. It was appropriate then. It was completely inappropriate 40 years later when I was applying it to 3 sets of sheets for beds that no longer existed in my apartment. The just-in-case mentality is a survival response that outlives its usefulness. Many of us who are now in our 60s and 70s carry it as an automatic habit long after the circumstances that created it have passed. We are still preparing for scarcities that, for most of us, are no longer our reality. Here is what just-in-case storage actually costs you. Not just physical space, though it takes significant physical space. Mental space. Every stored item represents a postponed decision, and your brain is still tracking every single one of those decisions, every one of those maybe items, running a background process of low-level anxiety that affects your peace every day. Professional organizers use this rule. If you haven't needed it in 2 years, you will not need it in the next 2 years. There are genuine exceptions, important documents, items with real sentimental meaning, seasonal items you actually use annually. But most just-in-case boxes are fear-wearing an organizational label. The question to practice is this: how is keeping this improving my life today? Not someday, today. Because today is the life you are actually living. Useless task number 4. Revisiting the same areas without ever deciding. Do you have a place in your home you have decluttered 4 times? 6 times? A drawer, a closet, a shelf you return to every few months, move things around, and leave largely unchanged? I had a cabinet in my hallway that I decluttered 5 times over 2 years. Every time I pulled everything out, I looked at it all. I reorganized slightly. I put almost all of it back. I told myself I'd deal with it properly next time. Psychologists have a name for why this gets worse each time rather than better: the mere exposure effect. The more times you handle something without deciding, the more attached you become. Familiarity increases perceived value, even when an object serves no real purpose. Every time you picked up that item and put it back without deciding, you made it slightly harder to release. You are not waiting for clarity to arrive. Clarity does not arrive through more exposure. Clarity arrives through decision. Here is what I implemented after I understood this. Each item gets one serious evaluation. I pick it up, I ask my questions, I decide. Keep or release. There is no third category, no maybe pile, no I'll think about it shelf. If I genuinely cannot decide in that moment, the item goes into a sealed box marked with today's date. 6 months later, if I have not retrieved anything from that box because I remembered specifically needing it, the entire box is donated without reopening. This rule has one important advantage. It removes the infinite loop. The decision has a deadline. The indecision has an expiration date. Your home cannot serve you fully while it is full of postponed decisions. Every unmade choice is a small weight you carry through every room. Useless task number 5. Keeping expensive items that no longer serve your life. This is one of the most emotionally complex, useless tasks. And I want to speak about it with the directness of someone who made this mistake for years. In our family, money was not always easy. I built a seamstress business from nothing in a country where I did not initially speak the language well. Hiroshi worked long hours building his engineering career. We were careful with money because we had to be. Significant purchases meant something. They represented work, sacrifice, planning. So when I had items that had cost real money, a professional sewing machine I no longer used at that capacity, a formal tea set purchased in Japan during a visit in the 1990s that we had used perhaps a handful of times, letting go felt like dishonoring the effort it took to acquire them. But here is what I eventually understood. The money is already spent. Whether I keep the item or release it, that expenditure is complete. The only question remaining is, what is keeping this item costing me today? Because it is costing something. Space you could use differently. The small daily discomfort of navigating around things that no longer fit your life. The guilt of seeing them. The mental tracking of maintaining them. I had a formal dining table and 8 chairs, purchased when we regularly hosted large gatherings of the Japanese-Brazilian community, dinners for Hiroshi's colleagues, holiday celebrations with our extended network. Beautiful furniture, not inexpensive, and completely misaligned with the life of a 72-year-old woman who now hosts intimate dinners for 4 or 5 close friends. The calculation that freed me. What is the cost per day of keeping this? Not the original purchase price. The daily cost of space, of visual noise, of the slight sadness of seeing something that no longer fits. That calculation made the decision obvious. The best way to honor an expensive purchase is sometimes to release it to someone for whom it will be genuinely, actively used. That formal table now belongs to a young family in our building. When I pass their apartment and hear voices and laughter, I feel nothing but rightness about that decision. Useless task number 6, creating too many sorting categories. I say this with particular love because this was so completely my mistake, and I think it is especially common among people who were professionally organized in their working lives. I was a seamstress who ran a business. I had systems for everything: invoicing systems, fabric inventory systems, client records, organized, categorized, cross-referenced. When I turned that same energy toward decluttering, I created categories worthy of a small museum: fabric, Japanese silk; fabric, Brazilian cotton; fabric, synthetic blends; fabric, remnants under 50 centimeters; fabric, remnants over 50 centimeters; fabric, special occasion. I spent so much time categorizing that I never arrived at the actual question, which was simply, how much of this do I actually need at this stage of my life? Elaborate sorting systems do two harmful things. First, they create decision fatigue before the real decisions begin. Your mental energy is consumed by classification before it reaches the more important question of elimination. Second, and this is the one that surprised me, complex categories are often sophisticated procrastination. Sorting feels productive. It looks productive. But it is frequently a way to stay busy while avoiding the harder emotional work of truly letting go. One client I know created an extraordinarily detailed spreadsheet of her collectibles: purchase dates, original prices, current estimated values, condition notes. It took her 3 weeks. When we finally sat together to make actual decisions, we donated 90% of them, and the spreadsheet was entirely irrelevant to any decision we made. The maximum number of categories during decluttering: 5. Keep, donate, discard, sell, only if you will genuinely sell it within 30 days, not someday. Relocate, items that belong in a different room. That is everything. That is sufficient. Anything more is complexity serving avoidance rather than progress. Simplify your system to match your actual goal. Your goal is a home that serves your life, not a perfectly categorized archive of your possessions. Useless task number 7, spending your energy on guilt about past purchases. I have saved this one for last because it is the most draining, the most invisible, and the one that keeps people stuck long after everything else has been addressed. Guilt about past purchases is a particular weight for people our age. We have more decades behind us, more purchases representing more stages of life, more items that were bought with hope or intention that didn't materialize the way we imagined. And so each of those items carries a small story of self-judgment every time we see it. I had a collection of Japanese language textbooks. Not unusual, perhaps, except that I am Japanese and was born in Japan and speak Japanese as my first language. I had bought them in Brazil intending to teach Japanese more formally. Community classes, perhaps a small school, something that would connect me to other Japanese Brazilians who wanted to maintain that connection to Japan. I had this vision clearly. I bought the materials. And then life moved differently. Hiroshi's work, the children's needs, my seamstress business growing beyond what I had anticipated. The classes never happened. For years, those textbooks sat on a shelf where I could see them every day. And every day they said to me, quietly, "You didn't follow through. You planned and didn't execute. You spent money on a dream you abandoned." This is a lie, and I want to name it clearly as a lie. The person who bought those textbooks was not making a mistake. She was expressing a genuine hope, a real desire to contribute something meaningful to her community. That desire was real. The circumstances that redirected her energy were also real. Neither cancels the other. You are not the same person who made purchases from 10, 20, 30 years ago. You had different energy, different resources, different information about where your life was heading. The person who bought that exercise equipment, those craft supplies, that bread maker, that musical instrument, they were making decisions with what they knew and felt at that time. Those decisions were not wrong. They were expressions of who you were and who you hoped to become. What ended my guilt about the textbooks was a simple shift in question. Instead of asking, "Why didn't I use these?" I asked, "What does keeping them cost me today?" The answer was, a daily reminder of something I judge myself for. That is an expensive item. Far more expensive than whatever I originally paid. I donated the textbooks to a Japanese cultural organization in Sao Paulo, where they are now used in actual classes. The dream found its destination, just not through me, and that is perfectly acceptable. Release the guilt along with the item. They belong together. When you let go of both, what opens up is not emptiness. It is the quiet, spacious feeling of choosing your present life over a story about your past self. What changes when you stop? Imagine your next decluttering session without any of these 7 tasks. You are not organizing before you decide. You are not researching perfect donation destinations. You are not building just-in-case storage systems for imaginary future scenarios. You are not revisiting the same areas for the 4th time without concluding anything. You are not keeping expensive items that cost you daily comfort and space. You are not sorting into 27 subcategories. You are not punishing yourself for purchases made by a different version of yourself in a different decade. Instead, you pick things up. You ask simple questions. You make decisions. You move forward. When I finally stopped doing all 7 of these things, not gradually, but all at once, with a kind of fierce commitment I found somewhere in my 2nd year of living alone, my apartment transformed in 3 weekends. 3 weekends for work that had been stalling for over a year. The physical change was significant. Clear surfaces, rooms that felt proportioned to one person's actual life rather than overflowing with 6 people's accumulated history. Pathways that were genuinely clear. A sewing room that functioned as a sewing room rather than additional storage. But the internal change was more significant. The low background hum of unfinished decisions quieted. The daily micro-guilt of passing unused items stopped. The mental energy I had been spending managing all of it, tracking, justifying, avoiding, became available for other things. For my ikebana practice, for long phone calls with Yuki in Rio, for sitting at my small round table in the morning with tea, looking at a room that makes complete sense and feels like rest. At 72, I am not interested in spending my mornings managing clutter. I am interested in living. These 7 useless tasks were standing between me and that living. I begged myself to stop doing them. I am begging you now. One question for you, and I would genuinely love your answer. Which of these 7 useless tasks do you recognize most clearly in yourself? Or, what is the area of your home you have returned to again and again without ever fully resolving? Tell me in the comments. I read every one. Arigatou gozaimasu.